And thanks very much for coming tonight. Not sure how many of you have been at the bar opening this year, so I thought, I was there in person the first time actually, so I was really excited. So I thought we'd start the presentation by showing you just a short clip about this year's opening, just to get in the mood. So the water level was around 1.17 meters, that's a bit higher than 2 years ago, a bit lower than the previous 2 years. And the cut was made approximately 100 meters away from the reference point, which is sitting here at the western cliff, that where it has been opened the last couple of years. At that moment, some person played the bagpipes, Meeting of the Waters, a traditional Scottish song. So I was really excited. Did not expect that. What are the colors doing actually? Pale. So other people excited as well, school kids. If the colors were alright, you would see that really nice mixing of the brackish brown water, thanks Sean, estuary water mixing with the blue water here in the ocean. So by the evening, the channel has widened a little bit towards the west, but not too much. And what you'll see in the next picture is these ribs starting to occur where the water flows out. And there's a bigger rib, and I believe that rib is still there actually on outgoing tide, and there's a nice surf point now in between there. Next morning, 8 o'clock, you can see all the sand is being washed out that has accumulated in the delta out into the ocean. And that part of the beach was washed away during the high tide overnight. So next morning after we opened the inlet, we got a call in the office by a gentleman who said, I noticed the water level in the Hay River is not, well, it hasn't moved at all. I know that you opened the bar, but it hasn't changed. So he says the water level is basically taking a lot longer to decrease this year. Let's see what happened. So here you can see the inlet water level on the day of opening and how it changes over the next 3 days. And the different colors are the last 4 years when the bar was opened. The blue one is 2020, this year, and that's exactly what the gentleman said. The water level stayed pretty much the same over the whole first day. When you compare that with 2017, the red one, also 16, the black one, you see there's a big difference. So let's see if we can find out what it was. These colors are bad. So 5 hours after the opening, the channel in 2017 was pretty wide already, while it was still pretty narrow, you can hardly see, by that time, and the water level just started to decrease in 2017. 20 hours later, the water level in 2017 had already dropped by ½ a meter, and you see the channel is really wide and hugging that western cliff and ocean beach. While this year the channel was just a little bit wider, but not much, and was still sitting in the middle of the sandbar. What contributed to these differences in the behavior of the change in water level? So we can think of a couple of things. So this year we had more than twice as much river inflow on the day of opening. So basically what happened is the water that flew out into the ocean, that was discharged in the ocean, was balanced out by the water still coming in from the rivers. The other reason was the channel dimensions. So we had a slower scouring of the bar, so you see a narrower channel here compared to 2017. Why was there a slower scouring of the bar or development of the bar? Probably it has to do with the initial water level, which was higher in 2017. That means the water has more energy, more force to open the bar quicker. The sandbar width, somebody said to me that the sandbar has never been as wide as this year on the day of opening. That means you've got a longer channel, and a longer channel means you need more energy to scour the bar effectively and quickly. And also, of course, the always present ocean dynamics, so swell height, swell direction. It's a bit harder to understand how they act, how they play in there, but they play a role as well. What else did we notice this year? The connection of the channel this year is pretty good, both sides, to Prawn Rock Channel and to the Eastern Channel. You see a beautiful shot here taken by the Shire of Denmark showing the marine water intruding both ways. What was certainly different this year is that channel hasn't moved towards the western cliff at all. So the picture on the left shows an image of where the channel usually ends up after a couple of days once it's opened. It's along the western cliff. This year it's sitting in the middle, in October it was sitting in the middle of the bar, and it's still sitting there. It's not going to move. We don't fully understand why that is. It might have to do with that slower development of the channel and the ocean dynamics, including ribs, but it's certainly something that we would like to understand a bit better, just to know why that behavior was different this year. Another thing that we noticed is that the stratification after saltwater intrusion this year was similar to 16-17 compared to 2018. So now I confused everyone. Let me just break this sentence down for you. What is stratification? When the bar is closed, wind mixes the water column, so salinity, oxygen, temperature is all the same throughout the whole water column. When the bar is open, the ocean can push in on high tides, and because the saline water ocean water is heavier than the brackish water in the estuary, it sits like a carpet at the bottom. So it's basically two layers, two stratas. That's what stratification is. When you have persistent stratification, you start to get low oxygen concentrations close to the sediment, and that can cause the release of nutrients from the sediment, which can then potentially fuel algae growth or plant growth in general. So I said in the previous slide that this year the stratification was similar to 16 and 17, but not to 18. So let's have a look at the data. So I'm going to show you, this is an image of Wilson Inlet. That's the sites we measure when we measure water quality every fortnight. I'm going to show you salinity and oxygen at one of the sites, which is the deepest one that we monitor. And that's horrible.
Can I try and fix it for you?
Sorry?
Let me try and fix it for you.
Very
quickly, because I feel like it's worth the time to fix.
Yes.
Is that better?
That is
Yeah, slightly.
perfect. No, that's good. Thank you. Okay, so this is a contour plot showing salinity from the surface to the bottom at this site between October 16 and now. And the different colors that we can now see thanks to Cassie are the brown river water, brackish, and the more saline water, the blue one from the ocean. And what you see is that in 2016, 17, and this year, we have stratification occurring. So you see that because we've got different colors over the water column. We did not have any stratification in 2018, which was the year when we had, well, it seems we had a weaker marine exchange. It was the year with a Y-shaped opening, the very short opening that closed in November again. And we certainly didn't have any stratification when the bar remained closed last year. What about oxygen? Whenever you see red or orange, it means that oxygen levels are at a concentration that can cause nutrients to be released from the sediment. And you see, we only have that once we have stratification in 2016, 17, and this year. We did not see any low oxygen concentration in the year when the bar was only open for a short period of time, and certainly we didn't see it in 2019 when the bar remained closed. So good oxygen levels when the bar remained closed. So oxygen levels are important because fish need oxygen, macroinvertebrates need oxygen. And it's one water quality indicator which can tell us about the health of an estuary. But there's also other water quality indicators like phosphorus, nitrogen, and algal activity. So let me talk about those, but before I start with talking about the estuary water quality, it's of no use to talk about nutrients in the estuary if you don't know where they're coming from. So we have to acknowledge that they come from the catchment. So let's have a look briefly at the last 4 years, what happened. So this is the annual river flow in 16, 17, 18, 19. So we see 2016 was a pretty wet year and 184 gigaliters of water was discharged from the rivers into the estuary. 17 was slightly drier, In 18, only 51 gigaliters were discharged into the estuary, but it was still enough to raise the water level to a level that the bar was opened. And then in 2019, only 32 gigaliters were discharged into the estuary. A really dry year, which meant that the water level was too low and the bar wasn't opened. So rainfall or river flow is transporting the nutrients into the estuary. So what does it mean for the nutrients? So that's the amount of nutrients washed into the inlet each year. So what you can see is that in the wetter years, more nitrogen in green here and more phosphorus in orange here is transported into the estuary compared to the dry years. And we're talking about, just to give you a number, 40 to 250 tons of nitrogen each year and between 4 and 14 tons of phosphorus each year. That's the range we're talking. Okay, so let's have a look at the water quality in the estuary. And specifically, I would like to show you how the fact that the bar remained closed in 2019, how it affected water quality by comparing it with the 3 previous years. This is total nitrogen in 2016, 17, 18, and 19 as box plots. And I know box plots are hard to understand, so if you can have a look at the top right corner, please, I'll explain these box plots to you. So the average concentration of nitrogen that we measure within a whole year is that white line. And the box, within the box, 80% of the concentration we measured are within the box. So if the concentrations are very similar throughout the whole year, the box is very narrow. If they're very different, the box is larger. And then we've got 10% of the data sitting here, and the highest value is this whisker, and the lowest value is down here. Okay, oh sorry, and the guideline value. So we've got a dotted line here, that's a guideline value. What it means is if the concentration was constantly above the guideline value, we expect the estuary to show some kinds of stress like fish gill, toxic algal blooms, excessive algae growth, things like that. All right, so what are the results? What you see is for nitrogen, the water quality is pretty much similar between the years, so it's certainly the same range sitting around the guideline value. But what we see is that there's a lower variability in the dry years, so these whiskers are missing here that you have here in the wetter years. And that's simply due to the fact that when it's wetter, there are more pulses of nutrients coming into the estuary very quickly, and we can detect it. Phosphorus, same story. Pretty much the water quality is similar between the years, certainly no difference between the closed year 19 and the wetter years, and again, lower variability in the drier years. What about algal activity? And I'm not talking about the macroalgae that you can see with your eye, I'm talking about the tiny ones that are in the water. Because that's another indicator of how healthy a system is. Same story. It's in the same range no matter if it was an open year, a wet year, a dry year, but what you can really see is it seems that in 2019 the variability was very, very low. What that means is we did not see any extended period, not even a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of our high algal activity. It was always low compared to these other years, even 2018, where we had like 2 or 3 weeks where we saw higher algal activity.
So which is good and which is bad? Is it good to be bad?
This one is actually good. So this is the guideline value. You see it is around the guideline value.
The smaller the box, the better.
The smaller, not the smaller the box, the smaller where the box sits. And that's box, the main of the box sits more towards the 0 value. So lower is better. But you need some, because otherwise fish don't have anything to eat. But you don't want too much. So all in all, what we see is that the estuary can cope with the nutrient loads coming in, and it seems to be pretty healthy and resilient, otherwise we would have high algal activity. That's what these data show. But we can turn it around and ask, why is the water quality actually similar in the year when the bar remained closed compared to the other ones, to the ones when the bar was open? And we can answer that partially by using the estuary model that we have promised you for a while and that we have now finished. And I want to show you some results from that estuary model. So we really need to understand where the river water flow goes once the river flow goes into the estuary, because the river brings in the nutrients. So we want to know where it goes. And the first question that we want to answer, and that we can answer with the model, is where does the river flow go when the bar is closed? And we're going to model this for the period in 2017, from March to the 24th of August 2017. That was the day when the bar was open. And then we say, what happens now when we open the bar? Where is the river water going? And how fast does it actually exit the inlet once it has been opened? And we're going to model that from the bar opening to March 2018. Okay, so let's go and answer the first question. Where does the river flow go when the bar is closed? How are we going to do that with the model? The way we do it, we use something called a conservative tracer. So that is basically water of a different color. So we tell the model the estuary has one color, the estuary water has one color, and we tell the model the river water has a different color. And then we let the river flow, and we can see then visually where the flow goes, how it distributes within the estuary, how it's diluted, and where it tends to accumulate. So this is the bar closed period. So we start on the 3rd of March, our model, so the estuary is blue, no conservative tracer, and then we let the model run with all the parameters that we feed into, like rainfall, wind, turbulence, evapotranspiration, you name it. And that's the result. On the day when the bar was opened, you see that the river flow, or the conservative tracer, tends to accumulate in the shallow areas around the edges in front of the rivers. Hay River, Sleeman Kappa, Denmark River, and Little River. So although there's a lot of wind mixing, it tends to accumulate there. So if the water now contains nutrients, which it usually does, that would mean it's likely to be fertilizing this area. There's good news and bad news. The map on the left shows you where the seagrass grows. And you can see the seagrass grows in these areas, meaning it can take up these nutrients before the nutrients reach the main water body, and so no toxic algal blooms, or in general algal blooms, occur. But there's also macroalgae, that's the ones that you can see by eye growing in the system, and they like nutrients as well. So they can overgrow the seagrass, smother the seagrass, and when they kill the seagrass, that's not what we want. So the only solution, and what that modeling tells us, is we need to reduce the amount of nutrients coming down from the rivers. That's the only way to keep it really healthy in the system. Okay, so now we can say, once we opened up what's happening with all this stuff that has accumulated here. Because I hear a lot of times, I hear people saying, oh, the inlet has been opened, it's going to be flushed, and the water quality will be great. Is that really what's going to happen? So how fast does the river flow exit the inlet once the bar is opened? And the way we do that, we use particles. So we tell the model, cut the bar, and at the same time release particles at the mouth of each river. And then we can follow the track of where the particles move, how fast they go. This is the result for the Hay River. So the particle, when it is released, at the very moment when the bar is cut, is blue. So that's the mouth of the Hay River. And then you can see this, there's a couple of particles, and that's, one is basically just going here and exiting within 20 days. But there's a lot of red here, so the longer the particle is in the system, the more it changes the color towards red. So what you see is a lot of particles are just circulating in that eastern basin. Some are exiting about 80 days later. When we do that for all the rivers and combine it, that's the result. It takes between 1 day and 180 days, that's 6 months, for river flow to exit the estuary once the bar has been cut. And half of it is still in the inlet after 60 days. So if that water contains nutrients, it's a long time for nutrients to be able to, well, for the plants to take up the nutrients and recycle them all over again. And much of the water entering from the 3 rivers over here is basically just doing what the Hay River does, just circulation in the eastern part. What we don't take into account here is the exchange, the marine exchange. So the last movie I want to show you is combining the marine exchange at the mouth and combining with the conservative tracer that we've seen before. So basically we start here with the movie, where the river flow tends to accumulate. So when I start the movie, I would like you to look at the mouth of the Wilson Inlet at Sandbar, because that's when we open the bar. So you see the water is flowing out into the ocean. It's a little bit of movement over here, not too much. It's definitely not straight away going out there. It takes, in 2017, it took 5 days for the ocean to actually start intruding into the inlet because the flow was so strong. And you see it's the 3rd day after the opening, the 4th day, so you will see first breathing of the ocean quickly, now basically. And now with every high tide, the ocean is breathing into the estuary. But what you see is it's not going very far, especially in the beginning. You see still there's a lot of concentration here, it's just moving around in circles, it's not directly flushed out. You see that was a bit of a deeper breathe, I would like to say, so it depends on whether it's a neap tide or spring tide, of course. But what you really see is that exchange is mainly happening in the western basin, while everything else is circling here. So it's definitely not a flushing of the inlet once we open the bar. The movie only goes for the first 2 weeks after we opened the bar, and we're certainly interested in what's happening afterwards. We had in 2017 that immense rainfall event in the end of September, beginning of October, so we're interested to see what that does. But this just shows you again how important it is to actually make sure we don't get the nutrients in the first place, to keep it clean. Because opening a sandbar is not going to do the whole flushing thing. Especially in light of climate change, it's important to understand, and especially what climate change means for future sandbar openings. And that's what I'm going to hand over to.